Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Is swearing tolerated in your workplace? While profanity can create a disruptive and uncomfortable environment for employees, there's a case to be made that it could build camaraderie. It just depends on the context, says leadership team performance specialist Adrian Baillargeon, who's written about the issue in his book, Teams That Swear. Chris Ashmore begins by asking Adrian whether we're swearing more these days than ever before.
Well, there is research to suggest that there's a generation divide, that when it comes to swearing, that Generation Zs, people born after 1996, that they're much more comfortable and much more frequently using stronger language. And that's comparing to people aged between that 55 and upwards. So it's definitely in the younger age groups, there's more swearing that's happening and then people are much more comfortable with it.
Are there different types of swearing?
Yes, according to Caroline Kavstek, who's a linguistics research student in Australia, she talks about 4 types of swearing. I actually think there's 5. So Carolyn talks about cathartic swearing, and that's the one where you're looking, you're swearing out loud or sometimes quietly, and it's really to relieve stress. The second one is around abusive swearing, which rightly or wrongly, some of us are probably familiar, but that's typically when we're swearing about someone. The third type of swearing is stylistic swearing. It's when we're emphasizing certain emotions or attitudes to get our point across a little bit stronger. And the fourth type of swearing is humor. Right? And typically if we're using it as a joke or to have a little bit of fun with somebody, it's really about strengthening those social bonds that express confidence when we were speaking with people. Now, the fifth one that I would suggest is a type of swearing, and I've made up my own word for it, Chris, as well, trustic swearing, but it has to do with trust. And when you are swearing by somebody and not about them, that's when you start to build trust in each other.
Does that suggest then that perhaps some of it, that they can be socially acceptable?
Yeah, I think what I'm finding, and it's funny when I talk about swearing, people are very excited to talk about. I was speaking with somebody recently, and they said they actually teach their children how to swear the right way. And what they meant was they're actually teaching them when it's okay to swear and when it's not, and in front of who they should be swearing in front of and who they should not be. So i.e., at school, don't be swearing in front of your teacher. So I think what I've found through the work that I've been doing is that from a humor side of things or put extra emphasis, it's becoming much, much more appropriate or welcomed. The cathartic, I think, is just natural. You think about when you stub your toe. What's the first word? I think most of us, there might be a certain word or two that comes out. Or when you bite your tongue, it's the same thing. So I think what I'm finding is that more and more people are comfortable with it as long as it's used in the right way.
Well, it depends on, I suppose, your teammates, doesn't it? Some people might find it offensive, but they don't say anything because perhaps they don't want to make waves or they're too shy or whatever, but they just have to put up with it.
Yeah, I'm probably of the view to go on the other side, to err on the side of caution, particularly if we're talking about at the workplace. And I think people get a pretty good read of it. If something happens and they drop an F-bomb here or there and they kind of pick up on the feel of the room or the feel of an individual, I always recommend to apologize at first, because an apology is always going to bring people together as well. So I think it's more erring on the side of caution, that let's not make the work a place of profanities on a regular basis. But when the opportunity is there, or it just seems to be somewhat natural, if it comes out, it comes out. And if you feel you've offended with somebody, check in with them and see what they think.
What about with clients or customers? Is it ever okay to swear in front of them?
There's some fascinating work that's been done across the world in this space. In 2006, there was a study from Northern Illinois University in the U.S., and it showed that observers reacted more positively to speakers who used the word damn. Not all the time, but just here and there in their conversations. So a study showed that using words like that, and those are probably minor swear words, but they didn't affect the speaker's credibility. There was another one, particularly in the sales space. This was fascinating. That a piece of research showed that sales professionals, they swear in about 20% of their calls. But the really, really fascinating piece that came out of this work was shown that if a client swears and a salesperson mirrors that, that they found that they increased their conversion rates by 8% compared to somebody who didn't swear at all, if one of the clients did, compared to somebody who doesn't swear at all.
Now, you argue in your book there's a case for swearing in teams. It builds connection. Can you explain?
I'm going to try a different way of explaining, Chris. I'm going to ask you a question. If you think about somebody who you would swear by, or somebody you'd feel comfortable swearing in front of, think of that person, but I'd like you to think about, why do you feel comfortable?
Because I know this person extremely well. That's probably the main reason, and I feel comfortable that we've had a past relationship where we've both been able to banter off each other and tell jokes that probably wouldn't be appropriate in front of other people.
When you say that, Chris, what I'm hearing is you've got a high level of trust in them. You can be that way. You're not going to be judged. They're not going to look at you poorly. They're not going to react negatively. And that's exactly what some research that was done in New Zealand is, that there was a group that was looking at teams, and what they want to be able to see is going, what is the difference between the teams that performed really well as a group versus the ones that performed really poorly? And what they found is in the teams, one of the characteristics that came out of the high-performing teams was that they had a high level of trust. So what they wanted to do is going, well, what are they doing that demonstrates that trust? And one of the traits of those teams that at the highest levels of trust is that the people were actually swearing more amongst each other. And when they talked to the members in those teams, what they found is they said, look, I feel like I can be myself. I can drop my guard. I'm not going to worry that anybody's going to be think that I'm a jerk or that I've got ill intent. It's just who I am, and sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's just reactionary, but they felt that they could just be themselves. And I think that's what's really important in teams is when you can drop your guard, when you don't have to worry too much about what other people are going to think, you can just say your idea, you can put it forward. That's going to drive the best outcomes for teams. So that's where, when you're swearing in teams, what the research showed essentially is that swearing builds trust amongst groups. And who doesn't want more trust in your team?
Absolutely. Does it come down to how you swear?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things when I'm talking about teams. And when I use this concept of swearing amongst teams as really a fun way to get people to think about how they work together. So I will ask questions, what's your favorite swear word and who do you swear by and when do you swear by them? When it comes to the workplace, there's definitely a right way to swear. So when you're swearing by somebody, great. When you're swearing about somebody or you're swearing about somebody's work in the negative way, not so good. If you're swearing with them, tick mark, that works. Or for them, yeah, great. But when you're swearing about people behind their backs, that's when trust starts to drop. Even the people you're swearing with, but about somebody else, people often start to think, ooh, what are they saying about me when I'm not around? So how you swear can be the difference between a team that truly shines versus the opposite when teams start to sink.
Right. Well, I suppose in summary then, swearing, it's a powerful tool. If it's done well, it can be great for the team. But if it's done poorly, it can be absolutely devastating.
There are cases, and I just spoke with somebody last week who have had warnings against them because of their swearing. A leader I know had a bullying case brought against them, and they went into mediation. And the only thing that could be proven factually was that the leader swore at them, or actually they swore about their work. And that was the only thing that could be used against them from a factual perspective. And it resulted in a first and last warning for this leader. So it can be, as you say, it can be quite devastating. Negativity breeds negativity, and it just brings those downward spirals when you're swearing about somebody's work or about somebody. So you have to get it right and you have to be careful.
That was author and leadership team performance specialist Adrian Baillargeon. For a free digital copy of Teams That Swear, follow the links in the show notes of this episode. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.